many people online and have already signed up to view the seminar afterwards. We're talking tonight about closing the gender investing gap. Hugely important topic. There's so much about women's empowerment, about the ways that people invest, the values behind investing to discuss tonight, and we're really pleased to have a chance to talk about this topic. You'll know probably that Mindful Money has been running these online seminars. There's a whole series, a much wider series, which you can view on the website. All the links to the previous series are on the website, and we'd certainly welcome your viewing of those. Tonight, we would welcome your questions in the chat window or on the Q&A, and we will get to your questions during the seminar and again at the end to make sure that we've covered everything that you've raised. Do keep an eye on the website, Mindful Money website, for upcoming events, of which there's always plenty to look forward to. And while you're there, you might like to check out how your Kiwi Saver or your fund is ranked on the Mindful Money metrics, and maybe have a look and make sure that it's meeting your expectations in terms of values. I am so delighted to be joined this evening by two fantastic panelists, and we're very, very grateful to them both for participating. Kirsty Campbell is a professional director and commercial advisor who's held a wide range of roles in the corporate, finance and banking and law and regulation fields. Kirsty and I are both directors of Archangels and the Archangels Fund, and we are. I'm very proud to be working with Kirsty on that gender project, and look forward to what she has to say. Our other guest is Victoria Harris. Victoria is a portfolio manager at Devon Funds. Devon is one of the sponsors for tonight's webcast, and we're very grateful to them. And she is co-founder of The Curve. Victoria has over 10 years experience in financial markets, and in particular has a good background in ESG, which we will doubtless come to. For those that are not familiar, Curve is an education platform for women globally, and we really look forward to hearing about that more. So we'll get started. I wanted to go to Kirsty first, and we will pose the question that is something that Mary Home covered in a recent article, and that was, what is the differences in the ways that men and women invest? What are some of the differences that you've seen, Kirsty, and what does that mean in investment terms, and what impact do those investment differences have? Comments would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Hey, hello everyone, and thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Bridget. It's a delight to be here tonight. I guess when I speak, I'm offering my own point of view as an investor. Obviously, as Bridget mentioned, I'm on the Archangels advisory board, and I'm very passionate about increasing access to the investment world from people from all walks of life, but particularly women. That's a subject that's very dear to my heart. So when we were considering this question, I went straight to the Sage of New Zealand, Mary Home. I think she's made investments more accessible to more people in New Zealand than almost anyone else. And I would encourage everyone to read her column or buy her books if you can, because she does make complicated things very accessible. And so a lot of what I'm going to say is based on what Mary has said in the past, and also, personal experience. And I think one of the things that she has observed, and it is based on surveys and so forth, is that there can be a difference in terms of the amount of investment risk men are willing to take versus women. And that may be from confidence, or some people might say overconfidence. Maybe it's from just more familiarity. Sometimes it might be that they've had a more financial experience in throughout their professional lives, personal lives, or through education. but that does seem to be something that shows up a lot. So, and of course, we know that taking too little risk can be just as suboptimal as taking too much risk. Sure, you might lose everything, put too many eggs in one basket. If you're not taking on enough risk, you're probably going to end up with a poorer retirement outcome. You might not even be beating inflation, especially in the current market environment. So it's really important to work out your risk profile, and then, you know, within the confines of that risk profile and, you know, your personal circumstances and so on, take on that risk and skill yourself up so that you are basically not just flying blind, but you know, have some understanding of the risk. And then the other observation that Mary mentioned was that men trade more. And again, you know, she suggested that might be through confidence, or it might just be, you know, higher risk appetite. But of course, that can have some interesting consequences too, because if you trade at the right time in the market cycle or in the right stock, you can get a fantastic outcome. But, you know, there is something to be said for setting and forgetting and sticking to your long-term investment goals and so on and so forth. So, you know, my personal view is that you don't try and time the market unless you're professional, or unless, frankly, you're gambling. You know, I don't feel like I've got the skill set to be able to time the market, and hence I'm not a high trader. I have a small Sharesies account that I play with, and it's great fun. I've even got some Bitcoin, you know, for my sins, but I certainly don't recommend that as a long-term investment strategy. And yet it's very popular, and for people who can afford it, it can be great fun, a great way of learning about financial markets and financial investments. So, you know, teach their own, but we need to think about those gender differences and think about why and what we can do to perhaps bring them more into alignment. You know, do we need more financial education? Do we need to make investments more accessible for women? And if they're not accessible, why not? Where are the tools? So I think, you know, just those two small differences that have been observed, you know, lead to a lot of interesting discussion points.
Kirsty, thank you so much. You raised the point about tools for investors, especially those who are early to the market, who'd like to know a lot more. And that's a great point to bring Victoria into this discussion. Victoria, as I said in the introduction, it was a co-founder of Curve, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about why Curve was necessary. Is it still necessary? What do you find is the major preoccupation of the women who come to Curve in order to get some more education on financial literacy? Thanks, Victoria, and welcome.
Thanks, Bridget, and hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Yes, so as Bridget said, I am co-founder of the Curve. So I set this up probably just about 18 months ago now. And I guess the reason behind it was, like Bridget said in the introduction, I've been in the industry for nearly 10 years now. And I had a lot of female friends and family members and you know, people in the community coming up to me asking you know, where to go to find out more or to start that investing journey or that investing discussion. And I was saying, oh, you can go here for this, you can go there for this, but there wasn't really one centralized place or you know, a platform to go to start that investing discussion or investing journey. So I thought, yeah, there's an opportunity there to provide that information myself. And so we set up the Curve. And I mean, we've been blown away by the success and the positive feedback that we've had from females. We deliver content through in-person events when we can, through a podcast, which has been phenomenally successful. We have blogs. We've just launched a masterclass. So we're kind of giving females the content the content to learn in a way that suits them, that suits their lifestyle, because we're all so different and we digest information differently to men as well. You know, a lot of feedback we had was, I'd love to have be able to digest the content while I'm breastfeeding and that kind of stuff. So it's delivering that investing content, you know, in a way that suits them. And yeah, like I said, we've been blown away by by the response to date, which has kind of made me guilty that I didn't do it sooner, and because there's obviously a big need for it. But we really break it down and don't talk in financial jargon, because I think that's where women and some men get put off starting that that investing journey, is that it seems very overwhelming. There's a lot of jargon, complicated graphs, and it's just almost put into the too hard basket. And that's kind of the worst thing, is to not even try or take that first step. So we're kind of trying to break down those barriers. And then I think if I take a step back in terms of maybe why women have been left behind in this discussion, I think it kind of comes back to, historically we weren't represented equally in the workforce. Men were a lot more dominant in that space, and over time we have become a lot more equal and balanced in the workforce. But unfortunately, we've been left behind in terms of the discussion around financial knowledge and investing, and so that kind of stems back as well from the gender pay gap and everything. So there's such a focus for women to know this information, and we need to know this information in order to have the financial future that we want and that we desire.
Yeah, and just to follow on from that, Victoria, one thing that I think keeps coming up is that the money gives you influence, gives you power. So that the more that we have women getting in behind the money, the more the women will be able to influence on outcomes that in society. So it fits really, really nicely with ethical investing and ESG and a sustainable future for all New Zealanders and the globe. If women are not part of that conversation, then we're actually missing a trick. It's a lever we're not pulling. So there's a real piece around influence, and that needs to come from the investors, but also getting women into the industry, doesn't it? So we need to be creating pathways into the industry, and also role modeling, seeing senior women in the investment industry and financial services industry more generally, that make it a more accessible career way. So I think everyone's got their part to play in that. So I think that's really important. And then the other thing is freedom. I use the example of my mum. I was 6 when my parents got divorced, and we didn't grow up with any money, and mum had to make some very hard financial decisions all by herself. So she included us in those financial decisions, and we were lucky enough to own a house and all the rest of it. But basically, financial independence for her was really hard to come by, and it was very difficult. And she didn't have access to good support or advice or the tools that we have now. And so she would not have been able to survive, I think, that divorce if she hadn't had some basic financial literacy and acumen and all the rest of it. And I think, as women, we need to give ourselves choices and freedom by having access to money, and that if you have a little nest egg, that can be really good for your confidence and your freedom.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely very empowering and such a confidence boost if you have that knowledge, and kind of, as cliche as it sounds, knowledge is power. And we get a lot of females actually in the situation that you just said, either they've separated from their partner, or things have not gone as planned, and that's when you have a really steep learning curve, as well as everything else you're trying to deal with. You're trying to get on top of your finances, and so we kind of say the earlier you can start, the better. And we would love to get into schools and get this taught in schools, because I think it's just absolutely vital. I mean, when we talk about being prepared for retirement, women are much more likely to end up in financial hardship at retirement, because 3% of our salary is different to the average 3% of a male salary. So we're contributing less as a dollar amount. And most of us will take time out of an earning capacity to look after family or children, and then we tend to live longer once we get to retirement. So we should be the gender that should be most clued up and knowledgeable, when it comes to investing and financial literacy. But unfortunately, we're not. So
yeah.
This matter of empowerment of women is such an interesting one, and I don't know, some of you will have read Melinda Gates's book called The Moment of Lift: Empowering Women to Change the World. And this comes very much from the microfinance experience, especially in areas of poverty or in the third world, where typically microfinance loans are given to the women in the community, not to the men, and the women meet as a group, and the women decide what the investment is going to be spent on. And this really reinforces the idea of women make very good investors. They look after their families and their communities, maybe better, and on average. These are generalizations, but it is this empowerment matter is absolutely critical. Kirsty, when we started Archangels, one of the primary objectives was to help women with, in that case, with some money, to be able to be confident investors using the power of community. Can you talk a little bit about community? And Victoria, I'm going to ask you the same thing. How does community or co-investing with others, talking to your friends about investing, being part of a value system, help you to become a more confident investor?
Yeah, no, I think there's investment clubs are just so beneficial in terms of helping people, number one, access education, but also confidence. It's about getting that feeling that you're surrounding yourself with knowledge and support, so that if you're making an investment decision, are you doing that too? And I know that we're not supposed to do the herd mentality, but it just helps that you're not alone, and it feels like a much safer way. Although I just like to point out that investing in early stage businesses is of course very high risk and not for everyone. But I would love to see more of those kind of investment clubs across the full category of investments, because it is great having one that focuses on angel investing, absolutely fantastic. But wouldn't it be great if we had almost like a female charities where we could talk about listed securities and ETFs and all the rest of it. But yeah, I do think that the sense of community it fosters is really important. And probably, whilst we're on the topic of clubs, SheEO is the other one to mention, isn't it, Bridget? And so for those who don't know it, SheEO is a community of I think it's women and non-binary members who all express radical generosity and put money into a pot, which is lent out to female entrepreneurs, and they pay it back on an interest-free basis, and then it gets recycled. So that is the concept, and you don't get your money back. So it's not a very good investment. It's not an investment at all. But what it is a community which is empowering women, because it's giving access to capital to female-led businesses. But it's also growing the understanding, and there's a lot of SheEO members who've never had any contact whatsoever with the business community or the financial community. They just were there for the philanthropy and for the impact. And they have learned so much around what makes businesses tick, what startups and scale-ups needs, and the kind of the financial aspects of growing a business. And what's happened through that is that people have started to help those businesses seek investment capital, from the market and actually invest themselves in follow-on fundraising. So that is just like watching a snowball roll down the hill. So I've really enjoyed that experience too.
Yeah, and I think there's something, just around community. I think really aids and helps women when it comes to investing. And I think there's a big thing around created by women for women. I mean, we've noticed that all the platforms out there for investing are very kind of, they're not women friendly, I guess. So it's kind of and then that's just part and parcel of the industry being male dominated. So they're the ones that have created those platforms or those tools. So I think there's a real support when it comes to but something that's created by a woman for women. And I remember when we first started the Curve, in our first event we had about 30 people, and then less than 12 months later we had 300 people. And I think having an in-person event where people can come and they can talk to like-minded women, and they can, like you said, with Investing Club, bounce ideas off each other. You're all in there to help each other. There's a real sense of community, sense of everyone, kind of the moment of lift, I guess, everyone being lifted up together. And we were just blown away to have, so many women in one room, wanting to have more control over their money and their financial future, and that was so empowering. And then getting little messages afterwards saying, hey, I changed my Kiwi saver, or I did this, or I didn't realize I was in such a low returning investment, thank you so much. Kind of makes it all worthwhile. And I think we're really trying to connect all those women in the curve, because I think the more stories that you hear of other women in the same boat, or in a similar situation, the more you feel like you're not alone either in the journey. So it's kind of, it's really that sense of empowerment. The more women you can connect together, makes everyone, makes all the females a lot more successful in that department. So
and you can ask the dumb questions going, what's a convertible note,
Exactly. And it's funny, you get, I've done events with both men and women, and that's just the difference in the questions. The questions from the females are a lot more inquisitive and wanting to kind of learn more, whereas I think the men are more, I don't want to say they're begging, but they're more matter of fact, and kind of I'm asking this. It's just different structured ways of learning, and I think it's really having a lot of women in the same room that learn in a similar way is really helpful. And you don't feel intimidated asking those silly questions, or the questions that you think are silly. So
One of the things that came up in the Mary Home article as well was that women are better at asking for advice. I suppose it's a bit like asking for directions, isn't it?
Yeah.
You just But and so that's this. I think this is another area where we really need to focus on, is making sure that we've got reflecting back ourselves in the face of the financial services community. So if people want to access advice that's with a female friendly, women friendly, then where are the women friendly advisors out there, both male and female? So I think I hope the Curve has something like this or thinks about it, but I think Sorted or something like that should have a section on if you're a woman and you're not sure where to start, here's some great resources that you can go to, such as shares, these are the Curve, or Arcane, so on and so forth, but also some simple practical tools. Now they've got great tools like the Kiwi Saver Fund Finder and so on and so forth, but I'd like to see a few more gender-specific tools. When I was researching for this call, I came across some gender equality funds in America, and they've got a very robust scoring system of companies based on their gender metrics. So it's women in leadership, whether it's board or management or senior technical positions. It's workforce, gender pay gaps, things like that. It's support for women's issues. It's a whole raft of points that they're scored on, and then they're put into a fund, and then you can access that. And that's for people who are perhaps very focused on a particular impact. That's not for everyone, but it would be nice to see some more in women specific impact measures come through in the investment product world. I don't know what there's there.
One of the things that we touched on with your background, Victoria, was ESG and ethics and values. And as far as I director of Mindful Money, and we are really conscious of the fact that the majority of people who come to the Mindful Money website to invest mindfully and to look and see what their Kiwi Saver funds are invested in and make sure that they're happy with that profile are women. So it is the majority gender by a significant distance. Why? What do you think? Firstly, I guess empowering women is going to mean a change in investment philosophy if that holds true. But what's your experience in terms of the way that women see values investing, ESG and sustainability and climate and those types of investment categories.
Yeah, that's a good
Victoria,
question.
perhaps you first.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, if I put my Devon hat on, and I, being a portfolio manager of the sustainability fund, which is the ESG fund, and it's what I've kind of invested through an ESG lens for a number of years now, and that was just naturally where I was attracted to, I guess, or drawn to, because I think the whole gender diversity, and in terms of having more females on boards and all that kind of comes into play under the ESG lens. So it was kind of naturally the way that I what was investing, and I think that the curve and being a kind of an ESG portfolio manager really go really well together, because you're trying to solve there's kind of two problems, but the same problem. And I guess it's I'm not too sure the reason of why more women are focused on ESG investing. I've definitely noticed it in terms of portfolio managers and analysts in the industry, predominantly women, especially, and then in the firms that we look at, there's this management or the sustainability management or the head of ESG in those firms is usually female as well. I think my just thinking off the top of my head now is probably comes back to our kind of nurturing side and our that side of things. I'm not too sure, but I think it's also maybe a part and parcel of us doing more research before we actually do invest in things, and we want to do that extra layer of that ESG research and making sure we're much more. We take our time before we make an investment. And I think that extra time, that ESG overlay comes into that when we're investing, because we don't just want to make a financial return. We actually want to have, to have a positive impact as well. So I think it kind of in a roundabout answer, kind of always comes back to that. But we do get a lot of inquiries through the curve as well around ESG investing, and that's just increasing, substantially, as you're seeing in the industry as well. But there's definitely a lot of females that are focused on that, like you said. So
yeah, and I would echo that. I sit on a few investment committees, and the conversation is different when you have more women of those committees. I don't know why. I did think it might be age-based as well. The fact that you come perhaps more from the periphery of the scene rather than the heart of the scene. I'm not sure if it's just about gender, but the conversations change when you have women in the rooms. Not all the time, massive generalization, but it's what I've observed.
Yeah, there's some. Just picking up on your comment about nurturing, there's something multi-generational about thinking about the planet, thinking about the future of society, thinking about affordable housing. I think we women worry a lot more about those types of social contract issues, maybe. And there's something and there's, from an investment point of view, there's the sort of multi-stakeholder matter that we're just more interested in a broader definition, I think, of companies and investment than, how much profit is it going to make at the end of the year. It's sort of just a very, I think, women tend to have a more holistic, perhaps a good way of summarizing it. But I mean, I'm sure people on the call will find these generalizations far too wide. But I mean, it is interesting to see how when you, as Kirsty says, when you're on a board and there are 2 or 3 women, the conversations about sustainability and climate and related matters tend to be more common and tend to be better supported. I think that there's been quite a lot of research on that matter.
Yeah, and
turning to boards.
Sorry, on you go.
No, you go.
We have to be careful, I think, as women in the finance industry, because at the end of the day, you've been taught to think in a certain paradigm. And actually, just because we're women doesn't mean we're necessarily thinking outside that paradigm, unless you become more conscious that there is a paradigm and that you can step outside it. So I kind of had to retrain myself when I left banking, to see things not purely through a financial lens and take a more holistic approach to impacts and outcomes of money, the power of money. And so I think it's important, again, with this role modeling in the investment community and also the messaging going to investors, role modeling from women and male feminists that it's okay to think beyond pure financial returns and so on and challenge the paradigms that have been in existence for a very long time.
And I think you've got this really cool dynamic of, ESG investing really, coming into its own and becoming a lot more mainstream as it should. And then you've also got a lot of women coming into the industry as investors, and you're kind of hopefully going to see this amazing combination. And I think that's kind of why, because you've got two such great elements or forces coming together in the market that are really kind of shaking it up and saying, there's no right or wrong way. There's no pigeonhole of how you should be looking at an investment. It's much more broad than just financial returns. So I think, I think that's kind of there's a combination of kind of two things going on, and you throw in the Sharesies, and Hatch and all those kind of DIY platforms into the mix as well, and you're opening up this whole investable universe to a whole lot of people who didn't have access to that before, which is also adding to those discussions around ESG and adding a whole lot of younger females into the mix as well that previously weren't able to invest because they didn't have $10,000 to start or anything. So there's a lot going on in financial markets at the moment in terms of change. And it's I work with some older guys in the office, and they said this is ESG investing and the launch of these DIY platforms is the biggest change that they've seen in the industry in their time. And so it's exciting to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you. Please do put any questions into the chat or on the Q&A. Belinda has sent us a really great question. Kia ora. Are you aware of any ETFs or managed funds in New Zealand that do invest in companies that have a certain percentage of women on boards? So they're focused on representation. She says she's loving the seminar. Thank you, Belinda. That's great. Thinking about other, besides the question, ETFs and managed funds, are there other investment opportunities and ways into this topic that we haven't talked about on this call so far that you wanted to mention?
There's not ETFs that I know of in New Zealand that are focused on this. I mean, Kirsty, you might know of some, but there are globally. There's women empowerment ETFs. There's women, and they all have different kind of criteria of what they invest in, and one of those being having a certain number of females on boards or in senior management roles, which is great to see, and it's really supporting those companies that do that. I think in New Zealand, I think the market's probably a bit too small to. Not creating excuses, but it is a small market, and even with ESG investing, there's only a handful of companies. If you took out gambling and you put some exclusions, you're really only cutting out a handful of companies. So I think that there's definitely scope, and I think there'll be a lot more options available in terms of ETFs in this space. Just with if more women wanting to invest in those ETFs, which means they'll do well. That the ETF itself, the performance will do well, which means they'll be more created because there'll be more demand for it. So I think it's a kind of a watch this space, but there are a few out there.
I think the other thing is that what's important is we are at least starting to measure metrics such as women on boards and gender pay gaps and so on. And so listed companies are starting to be held to account on that. And whilst we might not exclude companies because there are no women on their boards or so on, I actually think those things are probably being taken into account in terms of the quality factors and the overlays being done in the investment process in most firms now. But it'd be great to see. I think NZX does quite a good job of publishing that information, but we must make sure that it's kept front of mind. And it's not just about women on boards, because what we can't do is just be get a woman on the board who then it does exactly what the men do. It's actually about diversity and inclusion and making sure that the conversations do change slightly. So the other thing I find is that one woman on a board makes zero difference. You need at least two, and then the conversation does change slightly. And I don't know why that is, but it just does. I suppose it's just like playing tennis. You've got somebody to bat the ball back across the net to you. So really, one is not enough. I don't actually think that's meaningful. It feels token. And preferably, it would be the old 40-40-20, wouldn't it? So we're not there yet, but we're getting a lot better. And I think in public sector now at 50-50. So that's really good. But we're so far behind in the private sector, particularly in the unlisted space. Like there's a lot of very large New Zealand companies which are privately owned, and no one's tracking those in terms of female representation at this really senior leadership positions and the board level. So
yeah, I look at like multiple companies a day, and it's you're kind of hitting your head against a brick wall sometimes with the lack of diversity on the boards, and it's frustrating to see, and it's very slow moving. But I think that the more women we can get on the boards, and the more women will want to be on boards. But when you don't see you don't see someone in a position of influence, you don't strive for that. So I think it's it kind of comes down to the whole female prime minister thing. If you never see a female prime minister, you're not going to strive to be a female prime minister. So I think it's really having those females in senior leadership roles and in boards, so that the younger generation can actually strive to want to be that. And I think it's the same within the industry. There's such a lack of females in the finance industry itself. I mean, I've been the only female in every team I've ever been in, and it's when I was younger it was quite overwhelming, but now I'm kind of used to it, which is probably not a good thing. But just getting more and more females in the industry. It's diversity of thought. It's diversity around a table when you're looking at investments or discussing new investment ideas. The companies that I look at are different to the companies that that my colleagues look at. Older colleagues look at companies that are different to younger colleagues with different backgrounds. Like the more diversity you can have, the better for any business, I think.
Yeah.
And totally echo that comment about diversity. It's so important. Julie sent a good question. Thinking of ethical investing, it's very hard to think of a company that doesn't rely on low-paid workers, often women. CEOs earning in a week what many of these women will never earn in a lifetime. How can we bring some influence to these companies to stop them exploiting women? So this is a basic question about pay gaps and exploitation of lower paid workers, of whom many are women. So have you got any thoughts on that? Aside, I guess, from Kirsty's comment about statistics and gathering the data, holding people to account, which is certainly NZX and others doing that now. That's part of it, I think. But Victoria, have you got any comment on that point?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I think it is something that we look at when we do make an investment, but it is like when companies talk about if they've got the gender pay gap is there is no gender pay gap, and you're like, but hang on a second, all majority of the females are in lower paid or part-time work, and the majority of the males are in the senior management roles. It's kind of, yes, you're equal at that level, but what about the across the group or across the company? And we saw a lot of this in COVID. There was a lot of females that were either part-time that got that lost their jobs, or they're in lower skilled work and therefore lost their jobs. So during COVID, it was predominantly women that the majority of women that lost their jobs versus men. And so I think there has been a light that has been shined on this area and kind of the S part of the ESG, particularly during COVID, and just making sure that that companies do actually have better labour practices, whether they continue to pay them during the pandemic or pay them adequately. I mean, it is a difficult one though, and I think another great way is not just as an investor but as a consumer, you can definitely support or not support these companies with your wallet in that sense as well. So I think yes, you could not invest in them if you don't agree with their labour practices or what they pay their lower skilled workers. But you can also do it from a consumer point of view, and the consumer's waking up to that as well. So it's kind of on both sides. So I think it's again, it's a slow journey, but I think just even having these discussions is great. So
yeah. I mean, so I've sat on boards where we've gone through the gender pay gap exercise, and it is really insightful. But so we do need to be measuring it, and then we need to be tracking it to make sure that the measurement improvement. But you also need to like all data, there's lies and statistics, isn't there? So you've got to analyze it and understand the insights for your particular organization. There might not be just there might be no sexism at play. It might be something completely different that's at play that's difficult for a company to change by themselves. It's a societal issue, so everyone's got their part to play. But I would encourage people to go on the website mindthegap.nz, which has been I think it's been around for a while, but it's doing a lot of work around gender pay gaps and trying to get some real noise around it and encouraging people to highlight them. And it's the old sunlight is the best disinfectant. The more we understand it, the more we can take action. And as you say, Victoria, that's as an investor or as an investment professional or as a director or as an employee.
Yeah, exactly. Victoria, I love your comment about our role as consumers and as investors and how much power we have in both of those roles that often we don't really appreciate. And I think what we're seeing globally with ESG and responsible investing is consumers, investors really starting to exert, especially younger consumers and investors, being far more determined about making sure that their dollar, whether invested or spent, counts in redirecting the society the way that they want. Yeah. So mindful money very much on that theme, of course. But we're coming to the end. Ask both of you for any concluding remarks and before we close. But it's been a really fantastic seminar. Victoria, can I ask you for any final thoughts that you might have for the audience?
Yeah, no, I don't have much else to say, to be honest. It's been a great discussion, and we've covered a lot of topics, and it's been really interesting, and it's great. Like what I said, the more that we just need to have these discussions more and keep talking about this kind of stuff, and slowly but surely we'll get there in terms of the change. But I think it's great to see so many people attending the session, and great to talk to you both.
Yeah. So similarly,
thank you.
Similarly, I've really enjoyed this session. It's really made me think about it, because I've never really thought about a gender lens on investing. I guess I was always a woman in finance, and I just got on with it. I didn't really think about my gender particularly. And it wasn't really until joining things like Archangels and SheEO that I actually realized that there can be quite significant differences and outcomes for society, female-led ventures, businesses generally, employees. So it is actually something worth being conscious about, in terms of your investment choices and decisions, and doing a bit of research on and being more conscious. Yeah.
Being more conscious, more mindful.
More mindful, yeah.
Excellent. Well, look, mindful, exactly. So I really want to thank you both for your time. It's been really great, just wonderful to have your perspectives, and it's a great topic. I'm so pleased that Mindful Money team put this together. I want to, in particular, thank the Mindful Money sponsors, who are AMP, Booster, Generate, Harbour, and Devon Funds Management, and there are additional ones noted there. Invite you to keep an eye on the future websites, on the Mindful Money website for future sessions like this, which tend to run over. There's been a large number on climate, of course, there's a lot on sustainability, and there'll be a lot more coming. So look forward to seeing you all at a future podcast, and have a good evening, and thank you very much for attending. Thank you.
Thanks.